Being the game master of a horror role-playing game, more than any other genre, relies on the player's buy-in and imagination. You must agree to grab their attention and hold it in a firm, but measured and agreed-upon grip. Being a game master of KULT Divinity Lost, a horror role-playing game for adults 18 and up, requires finesse, timing, and imagination. In order to accomplish the horror sought after, there needs to be an agreement between yourself and your players. Without this understanding between everyone involved, your hard work, narrative elements, and immersive descriptions will fall on unbelieving ears. It is important that your players consent to a horror contract in which they agree to help frighten themselves. This will provide you an open door into the player's imagination, helping to build and maintain the desired horror mood. In order to give your players the best advantage, and since you are their biggest fan, consider these principles to help solidify the horror contract with your players. Know your players. What the characters are scared of is an important part of your world-building process, but it is just as important to know what scares your players. Effective game masters talk to each of their players about their fears and the dark subjects relating to them. It is recommended that you ask them each a few leading questions to discover themes and other dark ideas within their fears. What do you find scary about hospitals, skyscrapers, large old houses? Tell me how you feel about the dark, unseen corners of an unlit room at night. Include elements of those discovered fears and connections into the situations and scenarios in your horror game. Even if their characters wouldn't be afraid, the players unconsciously will be. Quality before quantity. There are many different approaches to horror, but the quality of the horror is more important than how much of it you have. Whether you're going for the psychological thriller, slasher gore, creature feature, or a combination of them all, pacing and build-up is essential. If your players' characters are running into mutilated corpses being eaten by monsters in every scene, the story loses its edge. To be an effective horror game master in KULT Divinity Lost, you must use restraint to build the tension and suspense. After these moments have passed, let your players recover, breathe, and regain a sense of control and comfort so the impact of the horror is felt. Putting the players through a gauntlet of horrific events is definitely a good tactic to use as a climax, but shouldn't be the standard. Build the atmosphere. You will want to create prerequisites for horror with your players in order to build the right atmosphere for your KULT game. The atmosphere of the world you create, as well as the atmosphere in which you play your game. An abandoned subway station at night and a packed cafe at lunchtime don't have the same feeling. But either of those settings can become scary as you introduce a sense of wrongness within the scene. If your players notice a 5-year-old girl through the subway station's darkness, they might think twice before continuing. But if they spot the same child in the cafe, they will likely think little of it. You may also want to create a horror aesthetic in your gameplay environment. Mood lighting, ambient music, and sound effects can all help enhance the fear and put the players in a mindset conducive to a horror game. Stay in the scene. As the game master, you control the time and space of the scenes within your KULT game. Learning to recognize your effective moments and stretch those out, you will improve your ability to hold your players in those scary, immersive moments. The same skill allows you to move on through the moments that drag. If you find your players in the right trap, keep them there. Things happen, people fall, drop their weapons, miss something in the shadows. Slowing down those moments will give you the opportunity to build on the horrors of your story. Suggest rather than overwhelm. The horrors of KULT Divinity Lost are served best in the imaginations of your players. Giving them the pieces and bits of information seeds those imaginations, which then take over and pull the player deeper into their character's horror. It is important not to give them too much too quickly, as this could confuse and muddle things. Give them pieces sparingly, allowing them some time to process and maybe even react. the right amount of information mixed with the scary atmosphere you've built, the player gets to assemble the scene themselves. They can hear the hard crunching of wet bone, the gurgle of a dying man, and create their own image of what is making those sounds. The inexplicable. The small inexplicable details increase the discomfort of your players and builds on the horror of your cult game. The quick jerky movements of a person they see, or the small details of a room that let them know that something just isn't right. Consider each of the people, situations, and places you include in your scenes. The man in the nice suit smells of iron and blood. Your missing daughter's diary lies open on her bed when you get home. All the food in the fridge has rotted overnight. You notice someone's made 4 calls from your cell phone while you've been sleeping. A doorway in the deserted building opens to a bright kitchen smelling of freshly baked pies and a smiling woman in a checkered apron. When things are not as they should be, the players become suspicious and guarded. Use this unease to make them feel threatened and vulnerable. Create a feeling of exposure. Creating a feeling of exposure is an often overlooked and missing piece to many horror contracts. You can manage this by sticking to a single guideline. The bigger the crowd, the more protected they feel. A solitary character will feel more isolated than a number of people in a particular location. Of course, it can be difficult to isolate your players' characters as they usually aren't of a mind to split up, especially in a horror genre game. Remember, the group makes them feel safer. One thing you can do in KULT Divinity Lost to isolate a character is through the use of hold and disadvantages like repressed memories or nightmares, which provide you with complete control over where the character is and what the scene looks like. You can also separate the characters in your story by using antagonists or the environment against them. If you want to get your PCs to move into obviously unsafe places, you'll need to motivate them. There may be a clue or something else important there, or perhaps it's tied to their dark secrets. These motivations will generally be enough to get your characters to investigate. Dare to be unpleasant. Creating the horror of KULT Divinity Lost goes far beyond the particular places where the PCs experience it. The character's inner life should also be afflicted. Take your players to the places you don't normally want to go. The uncomfortable, dark, sensitive places. Violence and death is oversimplified when people are beaten and killed without any consideration at all, no pause or reflection. As a KULT Gamemaster, you want to take the characters into scenes that are tied to difficult and uncomfortable subjects like intimacy, family, or sex. Have no mercy. If you understand the horror contract and communicate it effectively with your players, you will know the boundaries and limits of the players, allowing you to truly push the horror into those dark places. It should be difficult, offensive, and transgressive to the player characters. There are some excellent examples of being unpleasant in the core rules. Remember that it is critically important that you have discussed sensitive subjects with your group to ensure they can be a part of the story. Some subjects may cross a player's boundaries as opposed to their characters. It is very important for the success of your game that the players are given the opportunity to make certain subjects off limits, and as a group, determine which safety methods you will use during the game to ensure scenes can be easily ended without harming your player or the game. There are some very excellent sources of information and guides on employing player safety in role-playing games. We recommend the ENnie award-winning TTRPG Streaming and Safety Tools by Kiana Shaw and Lauren Bryant Monk, and Consent in Gaming from Monty Cook Games. Incorporating all of these considerations into the horror of your KULT game will allow the players to fulfill their end of the horror contract, allowing their imagination to bring life to the story you create. Thank you, Helmcast, for this wonderfully dark game and for dealing with my madness while I produced this video. If you'd like more information about KULT, visit KULTDivinityLost.com. If you liked this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. Please don't forget to subscribe and click the little bell so you don't miss out on the next video in this series. And remember, Death is only the beginning.